Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're here with me right now, you're likely carrying a weight that, well, it just feels absolutely impossible to describe. The confusion, the heartache, the sheer exhaustion of trying to make sense of what just hit you. Today, I'm stepping in as your recovery coach to guide you out of that thick, heavy fog of narcissistic abuse. We're going to navigate right out of the disorientation of a sudden, brutal discard and walk step by step into your absolute sovereignty. We are going to dig into the exact psychological and biological mechanics of what happened to you, relying strictly on the data, the psychological research, and the biological realities we've mapped out here. Let me tell you right now, you're not crazy, and you're absolutely not alone. So let's get to work. I need you to listen to me very, very closely as we tackle the exact question that's probably keeping you awake at 3 a.m. just staring at the ceiling. Why did they destroy you? You probably replay the memories endlessly, right? Looking for signs, asking yourself why the person you loved with everything you had suddenly turned into a completely cold stranger literally overnight. Well, the truth is, what your eyes saw during that discard, it was a complete illusion. That calmness you saw on their face, that wasn't peace. It was this quiet, deadened state just before a biological collapse. Their betrayal wasn't about you not being enough or loving them the wrong way. It was a calculated, desperate survival maneuver triggered entirely by their own deep-seated, unresolved trauma. Let's think about the actual biology behind your bond for a second. You didn't just love them emotionally. As a super empath, you have what's called a hyperactive mirror neuron system. Your brain literally simulated and metabolized their emotional state on a cellular level. You essentially acted as a biological home and an external regulator for their deep anxiety and overwhelming shame. You regulated their erratic heartbeat with your own steady rhythm. I mean, you practically breathed for them when they were suffocating in their own distress. And this is exactly why the sudden betrayal feels like it's dismantling your very DNA. You aren't just heartbroken. You're experiencing a severe physiological withdrawal from a deeply enmeshed biological bond. Okay, let's move into Section 1, the anatomy of sabotage, looking at the Sabrina and Nate case study. Let's dive into this specific case to understand exactly why an avoidant or narcissistic abuser responds to profound love with such devastating hostility. Why do they deliberately burn down the very house that kept them warm? Well, there's a complete disconnect in their realities. Because of her past trauma, Sabrina operates on this pessimistic bias. To her, closeness literally felt like engulfment. So her traumatized brain treated Nate's genuine, consistent, and safe love as a dangerous system error. She simply couldn't compute a reality where his only gain was just seeing her happy. Her fear-based logic told her that his love was nothing more than an elaborate setup for a massive, inevitable betrayal. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop, so she just threw it herself. Meanwhile, Nate, who was operating in actual reality, saw only profound loss. He offered everything and lost everything. But you have to realize you just can't use healthy, rational logic to negotiate with an operating system that is fundamentally programmed to expect a crash. So how does an avoidant brain handle this perceived threat of engulfment? They use extreme deactivation tactics. To justify leaving without having to look in the mirror and admit to being the bad guy, Sabrina literally had to manufacture a crisis. She completely rewrote reality, falsely accusing Nate of abuse and cheating, things that absolutely never happened in the real world, just so she could feel morally justified in pushing him away. She used the nuclear option of a sudden, cold betrayal as a preemptive strike, and on top of that, she drained his resources to fund her intense addiction, weaponizing the physical agony of her own withdrawal to manipulate him into paying for her city runs. She forcefully severed a bond she was utterly terrified of, deliberately turning him into a monstrous villain so she'd never have to face her own paralyzing shame. Listen to this incredibly painful quote from Nate's letter to her. He says, "You make me feel and almost believe that I'm at fault when it's you who can't be trusted." Wow. This just perfectly captures how the empath is manipulated into bearing the absolute burden of blame for the abuser's fractured reality. The manipulator warps your perception, gaslighting you into believing that your completely normal reactions to their horrific abuse are somehow the actual problem. It's reverse gaslighting at its absolute most toxic, designed purely to make you doubt your own sanity while they walk away completely blameless every time. Now, think about your own experience with that heavy, unspoken burden. You suppressed your own anger, you dropped your own boundaries, and you carried this massive emotional responsibility day in and day out. You basically became a high-voltage current trying desperately to power a low-voltage appliance. Listen to me. The relationship didn't blow out because your love was faulty or because you didn't try hard enough. It blew out because their hardware simply was not built to hold that kind of power. They short-circuited under the weight of genuine intimacy. All right, moving right along to section 2, explaining the loop and the trap of false closure. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding why you feel entirely stuck, perpetually waiting for an apology or an explanation that, let's be honest, is never, ever coming. Enter the Zygarnik effect. This is a fascinating psychological principle stating that our brains remember incomplete tasks way better than finished ones. Think of a waiter remembering a complicated, unpaid tab with perfect clarity, but completely forgetting the entire order the very second the bill is settled. By discarding you via a silent ghosting or a sudden, unexplained betrayal, the narcissist intentionally leaves a cognitive loop wide open. They deliberately withhold a proper ending because giving you one would close the loop and set you free. Instead, they leave you with 1,000 unanswered questions. Why did they leave? What did I do wrong? Was any of it real? This traps them in a mental cycle, sure, but they are desperately hoping you stay stuck in that paralyzing confusion right along with them. Let's actually compare their post-breakup path to yours. While they actively suppress their emotions, cycle rapidly through shallow rebounds, and suffer what neuroscientists call phantom limb pain, reaching out neurologically for a connection and a regulation that just isn't there anymore, your trajectory is entirely different. You possess high neuroplasticity. Yes, you have to do the grueling, painful manual labor of grieving. It hurts. It's exhausting. But because you're willing to do that manual labor, you can actually close the loop internally. You heal. You rewire your brain for healthier connections. Meanwhile, they remain forever haunted by the unfinished, unhealed version of themselves that essentially died the very day they walked away from you. Which brings us to Section 3, the tactical shift, no contact of the dead. Now, we move to the single most important tactical tool in your recovery arsenal. This is the moment where you put your hands back on the steering wheel. Freedom without connection is just another word for suffocating in the vacuum of space. During the discard, the avoidant felt this massive rush of dopamine. They thought they were finally free, finally unburdened by the terrifying weight of your love. What they didn't realize, they were like a deep-sea diver who, in a moment of sheer panic, just cut their own oxygen hose. When you completely vanish, they are suddenly left without the vital oxygen of your emotional regulation. In the silence of your absence, they realize entirely too late that they've severed their own life support system. And this is exactly why we implement the no contact of the dead. Let me be perfectly clear. This isn't some petty strategy to make them miss you. It's not a manipulative game to win them back or teach them a lesson. It is an absolute structural necessity to reclaim your biological and psychic energy. You block, you delete, you vanish completely. This causes a massive, deep narcissistic injury to them because it fundamentally shatters their arrogant core belief that you are desperate for them. It proves through your actions that you are not their prize waiting on a shelf. And more importantly, it actively and permanently starves their dysfunction of your precious, life-giving energy. And finally, we arrive at Section 4, the alchemical evolution. Let's explore how we transform the agonizing heavy lead of this profound trauma into the pure gold of absolute wisdom and unshakable power. Carl Jung identified that surviving this type of profound emotional abuse acts as a psychological pressure cooker. So, as your coach, I want to walk you through the RISE method to navigate this. Step 1 is recognition. You've got to stop romanticizing your suffering, stop making excuses for their trauma, and reclaim your responsibility for your own life. Step 2 is integration. You must own your shadow. This means finally allowing yourself to feel and integrate your suppressed, justified anger and building rigid, protective boundaries. Step 3 is separation. The absolute, complete psychic withdrawal of your energy from the abuser. You no longer exist in their orbit, period. And finally, step 4 is embodiment. This is where you literally exist differently. Your nervous system finally calms down, the anxiety fades, and you walk through the world completely anchored in your own unshakable internal authority. This right here is the ultimate evolution. You used to be the unconscious empath. You lived with porous boundaries, endlessly leaked your precious energy to anyone with a sad story, and constantly sought external validation by trying to fix broken people who just didn't want to be fixed. You thought saving them would save you. But through this alchemical fire, you become the sovereign empath. You have an integrated shadow. You source your own safety from within. You still feel incredibly deeply. That beautiful empathy isn't gone, not at all. but you are completely untouchable and unreachable by narcissistic manipulation. You simply respect yourself too much to ever confuse compassion with self-abandonment again. I want to leave you with one final critical question today. Will you stay a shelter for their dysfunction, or will you step into your sovereignty? You see, you won the breakup the exact moment you respected yourself more than you loved their potential. The fire you just walked through, it wasn't meant to destroy you. It was designed to burn away the parts of you that were ever willing to settle for crumbs. The illusion is over, the loop is closed. So take your power back, protect your peace at all costs, and ask yourself right now, are you ready to finally be free?
Hey Nate, I wanted to reach out and sincerely apologize. I'm truly sorry for the hurt I've caused you, and for all the bitter things I've said and done. I was such a narcissistic, sadistic pain to you, and you deserve so much better. And I deeply regret my behavior.